So now we're going to cover setting up a Stratix for initial use. So this is called Express Setup. For anyone who's messed with it before, it potentially can be frustrating the first time you go through it. So we wanted to make a clear and simple method for doing it. I like to power off the switch a certain way through the process because you kind of get a guaranteed result. The biggest thing with the Express setup is the switch boots. It takes some time, so just having a certain level of patience as you're going through the process. In this video, we will cover Express setup with the Stratix 5700. Express setup will most often be used as our initial configuration for a Stratix switch. Before we begin, we'll cover what happens with this process automatically. It runs an AB global macro. What this does is first enables IGMP snooping in Querier. Benefit of this, it only sends multicast traffic to devices that should receive it. It enables SIP, or Common Industrial Protocol. This allows for a connection and monitoring via PLC. It enables alarms, syslog, and SNMP notifications. Benefit, additional remote monitoring and diagnostic functions. Enables rapid spanning tree, BPDU guard, BPDU filter, and loop guard. Each of these functions are meant to prevent network loop failures. Finally, it configures quality of service settings to classify SIP, PTP, and other traffic. The benefit? It prioritizes time-sensitive traffic. Prior to beginning Express setup, we must verify our PC is ready for the process. During the setup, the switch will automatically assign an IP address to our PC. Therefore, we must configure our PC for DHCP. On Windows 10, this is done under Ethernet settings, which can be accessed via the Start menu. Once in Ethernet settings, we will go to Change Adapter Options, select our local area connection, and select IPv4. From here, we will set to obtain an IP address automatically. Focusing now on our Stratix 5700. If your switch is not in the default state, you can reset to default using a 15 to 20 second press of the Express Setup button. However, this should be done with caution as you will lose the previous configuration. To begin our Express Setup, we will press the small button using a thin wire or paper clip. After we press, one port's LED will illuminate, indicating we can connect our PC to that port. From an internet browser, we will go to the default IP address of the switch, 169.254.0.1. When asked, we will click Advanced and proceed. We will then enter the default username, which is left blank, and password, which is lowercase switch. Click Login. Here, we can define a name for our switch, the management VLAN. This is the VLAN that we can access the switch from management, how the IP address will be assigned to the switch on that VLAN. In this case, we're going to do it static of 192.168.1.100. A default gateway. If this is a layer 3 environment and there's a gateway allowing us to get to another network, this is where we would specify the IP address, as well as a time server if needed. We must also specify a user and password. Under Advanced, we can enable SIP, which allows us to communicate with PLCs for monitoring, enabled by default using the same VLAN. We can enable SSH or Telnet, which allow us to connect for remote client connections via the command line interface. We're going to leave those unchecked and click Submit. From here, we can cycle power to our switch, which we will do by removing power and reinserting power. The switch will take a few minutes to reboot. While it's doing that, we will go ahead and put our PC back on the network that we just had the switch IP address. This is done under Ethernet settings, Change Adapter Options, Local Area Connection. We must have an IP address that is on the same network but is not already in use. In this case, we use 192.168.1.225. When we click on our subnet mask, it will automatically apply 255.255.255.0. This default subnet mask means that everything on the 192.168.1 network is on the same network, and 225 is our unique identifier on this network. We will click OK. Once our switch is finished rebooting, which we can see via the lights below, we can continue our process. In our web browser, we will go to the IP address we assigned to the switch, 192.168.1.100. Again, proceed, and use the username and password that we assigned during Express setup. Our switch has now completed the Express setup and is ready for additional configuration.